Hello, creatives, and welcome to episode 6 of the Tailored Wellness Podcast. And today, I'm talking to you about standing out and being yourself. It's a bit about finding your own path, and what does it really mean to be yourself? It's a complicated topic, and quite an intense one, too. Being yourself is actually the name of the coaching I mentioned with Yola, which you can check out in our episode. The first thing that comes to my mind is, am I afraid to be myself? And if so, why? And honestly, I think the answer is yes, because often, let's go way back to a distant past. When you were in secondary school or even primary, people would say, you're too much of this, too much of that, not enough of this, not enough of that. In the end, it always comes down to not being yourself. It's always about being too much or not enough, but never just right. And I think being yourself is about being just right. Why am I talking about this? Because I think it's important, in work, to be yourself, to be just right, to be in alignment. And it's often difficult, between the unconscious expectations we have of ourselves, the expectations of others, social, family, or cultural pressures, or even those from the environment we move in. And I think that even in fashion, it's often something quite performative. And for me, it's sometimes a real challenge to ask myself, what can I show about myself? What is okay to make public about myself? What is absolutely not okay and not ready? And what will never be? What is completely private I will never reveal? At least regarding intimacy, or rather, what stays private. But it's always about vulnerability, to show yourself and be ready to open up. And when I think about my collections, there was a lot of introspection involved with each one of them. Even though I mentioned in another episode that sometimes there was this idea of a mold when I arrived in Paris, above all, it's also a quest to find oneself. In the brand's DNA, there's really this idea that the self is always transforming and changing. And that's why the clothes always have folds or layers, like a space that transforms, just like us, where the garment becomes a companion in discovering and revealing oneself. In opening up, it's once again important, but above all, it's sometimes a challenge to take the risk of revealing and opening up. That's the aim of this podcast, to be able to talk a bit more about myself and to show other sides of me that I don't necessarily see in my work every day, and especially not publicly on social media. But there does come a point where the act of making this podcast is also, at some stage, about choosing myself and accepting that this is who I am. I can be a bit of a clown. I can be a bit of a business owner. A bit bossy because a company has to move forward. Like, sometimes, not being at all sure about what I'm offering. Being full of doubts because of my sensitivity, sometimes too sensitive. Sometimes completely closed off because it's just too much. There are too many things. So when people say hypersensitive, neurotypical, it's waves and waves and waves of absorbing things. But it's a journey of discovery, and that's also why I created the brand. Another thing that's quite particular is that I have this tendency to be a chameleon. That is to say, in a given context or space with certain people, myself changes. Is it, how can I put it, something linked to traumatic experiences in relationships? I don't know. Or is it a real social skill? Being able to blend in anywhere, in any context. Choosing who is what, which side of the coin, I don't know. But that's sometimes the topic of trying to understand myself about, so wait, is it adaptation or is it really me on this subject? I don't always have the answer. It wasn't always easy. But to get to this question of creativity, it was really, with each collection, about finding my style, my voice, my path, figuring out what I'm saying at each moment, and why. These details are more me, no, that's too much me, not me. And it's about defining your creative identity in terms of what Stephen Passau is as a product, as a brand, and as a designer. There are elements that are purely visual, where I'll use codes like pleating, pleats, tailoring, deconstructed tailoring, and also a natural, floral aspect in collections where some things just didn't work. Not really so much in terms of styling or in terms of makeup. It's a path that is, let's say, necessary in order to be able to refine things, to say, okay, in everything I've produced so far, I've found my style. This feels like me. That doesn't feel like me. That's a bit too far from my spectrum. This is much closer, and we're looking at a mix of all that which, in the end, forms a creative universe. And now, my aim is that with every collection, I ask myself this question. Is this an evolution of myself? Or is it far from who I am? Or is it not me at all? Me, in the sense of both the brand and the creator. So, it's very important. And I think that this process, it doesn't exist in a set way. There's no magic formula. It takes time, and trial and error.
And there's no other way around it. It's a bit like that quote from Rick Owens that went viral on TikTok at one point. Learn how to make clothes, don't do collages, it's bullshit.
That's pretty much it. You can't just show up and say, right, here you go, this is me. No, because you're not a sheet of paper or a brick wall, you're something living, you change, you have influences. You have a brain, you're constantly evolving. And it's human, it's alive, so it will keep evolving. And I don't really believe in radical things. For me, every new collection is an evolution of the previous one. It's always a journey. And with the different themes I've explored in the collections, whether it's the hero within, the beauty of change, or moonlit lover, in the latest one, we're always digging deeper through different lenses, but there's a central theme that keeps us from straying too far. And then sometimes, there are new techniques that come in, that get added, that evolve, but we still keep things fairly focused. And I think that can be difficult at times, especially since we're constantly faced with new images, in an environment where there's always something that's changing. Things are always moving forward, and then there are trends and things that I don't follow at all. That's not my path at all. It's more Craig Green's work that I really like. Actually, each collection is a central story, but it's an evolution that changes and develops. We're looking at an artist who refines their line rather than changing canvas or tools, and so on. In any case, that's how I see it. Choosing your own path isn't always something that's... How can I put it? Easy. I think it's something in my life where I had to choose my studies. Because I did a baccalaureate in electronic engineering, then I did architecture, then I wanted to do communications, and so on. And actually, it was never easy. And I always remember that image of studies being a straight line. And you're not supposed to go off in different directions. Actually, I did everything but follow a straight line. It was all over the place, like snakes twisting in every direction, winding paths, pauses, ups and downs. But all of that has fed into what I do today. And now, when it comes to making choices, it's mainly my perspective and everything I've learned in the past, even from other fields. That shapes my decisions today. And the biggest example is 3D. For those who don't know me, I've been working since the very beginning of teaching. The brand with 3D development tools, virtual pattern making, which today is called Style 3D. And the idea is a bit like architecture. In architecture, you don't build full-scale models of the buildings you're designing. You make models in 3D, digitally, and the idea is to do the same thing with clothing. So, using the software, I developed the entire collection in flat pattern on the program, with an avatar at a standard scale from our measurement chart, which we use a bit for the catwalks and for the products, which is a European size 48. And all the garments are presented in 3D, and we decide on the design before moving on to real 3D prototypes. We also have the option to scan the fabrics, which allows us to see both the visual aspect and the mechanics. So, once again, it's a virtualization tool. And at the end, once the 3D is ready and the design has been approved, I print the pattern, then move on to assembly, either in-house for the more prestigious pieces, or outsourced to a factory, an external workshop for ready-to-wear. This is an incredible time saver and is an eco-friendly approach. Right now, no one cares. Or no one at all. I've believed in this for 5 years and I'm championing it. Because if we don't do everything, 2 years ago I calculated for 2 collections, 60 items, and still saved €100,000 in materials. And I wasn't even counting the human labour or the rest. And it was, I think, 5,000 tons less CO2 in the air, which is not insignificant. If you take this technology and scale it up to a luxury house, a big group, I think we're talking about several million in savings per year. And that's not insignificant, I think, especially in 2025. So for me, innovation was also a choice that shaped my path. And to touch on my slightly geeky, nerdy side, when I was younger, I used to play The Sims. So basically, my job now is a bit like playing The Sims, it's professional innovation. I remember sometimes spending my nights trying to figure out how to make a 3D object, change a Sim's hairstyle, put it back into the software, learning Blender. And actually, that same energy I have for technological curiosity, I now bring to my work thanks to this innovation. No one knows this, but I'm a massive geek and I play video games. I've played every level, from the easiest to the hardest. By the way, Daniel, Assassin's Creed is pretty good. The visuals, the aesthetics, that's not what inspires my work. But it's the only thing I've found that really keeps both my hands and my mind busy. So I'm not just on my phone, scrolling through TikTok or Instagram or whatever, and it lets me escape a bit from my everyday life. So technology is important. And speaking of technology, these days, it's all about AI. Back during COVID, it was all about NFTs, blockchain, whatever you fancy. All those people have now switched to AI. Now it's AI this, AI that, AIB, AIBZ. For me, there's always been a bit of a motto about this. Technology should be useful and meet a need. It shouldn't create a need. That is to say, it should be there to help us get things done faster in our daily lives, but it shouldn't really replace humans. It should help people to be quicker. And that's sort of my definition of technology and how I use it in my work. I'll use voices for a quick photo touch-up because it's much faster. Or, of course, I'll use ChatGPT for a text because it's much quicker. But humans still need to remain at the heart of things. It's essential, and technology has no emotions. In my work, I talk about emotion. Humans have emotions, humans create emotions, but technology doesn't. It might replicate them, perhaps, but even that's debatable. There's still much uncertainty, and things will change in the coming years. But innovation is my tool, and for me, it allows me to stand out in my field. Not as a person, as an individual, but at least to be different in business. And as I explained in another episode, it has also become a tool that can help the client to imagine themselves, to personalize the experience and really get as close as possible to the reality of the product without spending a penny on raw materials for now, and to have a truly responsible evolution. Will that still be the case tomorrow? I think so, because there will always be new tools being added and developed. Honestly, I think today I am one of the pioneers. Big brands are far behind. I see them starting to reflect and implement, thinking, we're behind, what do we do? It's more complicated for a big brand because you have to imagine that a brand is like a big wheel. On a road that needs to be set in motion, whereas a small brand is like a small wheel that can get going much more easily, but there's less height, so it can get things up and running much faster. And that's also the flexibility you get with smaller brands. How do you know when it's not really you, and when it is, and when you're in alignment or not? I really think we all have an intuition inside us, a little voice. And that voice is often drowned out by all our anxieties and all the blah, blah, blah. I know that sometimes my mistake was listening to others too much. When I have questions, when I have doubts, I go and ask this person for advice because they're an expert. Or I ask someone else because of their wealth of experience, you know. And in the end, you come back to yourself, you face yourself and you think, but this goes against what I believe. I don't buy it. She told me that, but actually, it's not at all what I think about the field today, because based on the research I've done, it said something else. And actually, it creates more confusion than clarity. And sometimes the best thing is to let go of everything, to refocus, to go out into nature, or take a shower, or do whatever other activity. Rather than trying to find the solution to these answers. And the answers often come on their own. It's always your brain that gives you what you need at the moment when you're not looking for it. It's very strange, but it's a bit like trying to force a button when it doesn't work, and then you leave it, and it just works by itself. It's like a flower. If you leave it alone, it will bloom, but if you start fiddling with it and so on, it won't like it. It's the same with ideas. You have to let them come about on their own a bit. And, above all, trust yourself if you make a mistake, or if there's something that's not necessarily, as I said earlier, not 100% in line with yourself, that's okay. It's not that you've taken the wrong path, like when the GPS tells you you've gone the wrong way. No, we recalculate. We redirect ourselves, we recenter. And it's also good sometimes to have, basically, an A4 sheet or some kind of vision board or mood board. Guidelines. Visible in your studio, in your creative space, where you have 5 key words, 10 images that tell you, right, this is me, This is really the core, the heart of it, and I mustn't forget that. And another thing is anything that keeps repeating itself. I know that in my work, for example, there are things that are repeated in a somewhat unconscious way. So everything that repeats itself is part of me because it keeps coming back. I don't really know how to explain it. It's a bit intuitive, I don't know. But at least, from the non-visible side, the things that repeat themselves are part of me. That's a belief I have. Maybe it applies to you, maybe it doesn't. But there you go. That's my bit of advice for staying focused on standing out and being yourself, and to wrap up on one thing. Standing out doesn't necessarily always mean reinventing the wheel or changing the world, but more about saying, here's my vision, how I see it, and how I would do it. Expressing your point of view and having the courage to do so, I'll admit, I haven't always managed it myself either. But when I see this whole new generation on social media, speaking up in front of the camera, it's a really tough exercise, but you learn a lot by doing it. So don't be afraid. To stand out, to speak up. In conclusion, I'd say that imperfect action is better than inaction. Always, if you find yourself stuck, take a breath and go for it.